It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Friday, July 14th, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. Today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Until the End with Daniel Baker, the Wednesday Message Word Study, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? It is Friday. Yes, I am so excited and happy. The weekend is here. If you haven't yet, go ahead, leave a like and comment to build our community. Really happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other. This week's Sunday message: don't think about other things. Just fulfill what you need to fulfill. Right? It's a great week. Lot of good conversations, and you know, I have some points that I want to make at the very end of this first segment about, especially when it comes to male evangelism, marriage, and stuff like that too. And I think it's going to be the most important point that we need to think about more than all the other things that we've talked about, right? So let's first, let's just kind of smooth into today's podcast. So it is the weekend podcast. We have a lot of things going on. Hope everyone is looking forward to an amazing weekend. Yes. And once again, I will brag. I'll be going to a beach barbecue tomorrow. Yeah. And I don't want to say much more about this barbecue beach party because I just don't want people to get jealous. Yes. I know some people might be a little bit like, oh, I wish I was there. But yeah, I understand. But I know that some people are having even more fun than I am on this weekend too. So no more of this. Either way, I had a fun chat with a friend. You know what? I just said either way again. Someone brought this up. Someone brought this up in the comments. They said they pay me $100 per episode if I didn't say either way. Oh, who is it? Who is this person? And I am expecting my donations to come in every podcast. I don't use the word either way. Remember, it's $100 for every single one. So, we have you in the comment section. But you know what? It's better than saying, and making those types of noises instead. But, I'm going to say either way again. Oh, okay. So, yeah, I know. Because you said it, I'm thinking about it a lot more. I'm like, oh, I do say that. Oh, I do say that here. But I was having a fun chat with a friend, and we were talking. This is kind of like interesting because we were talking about in the future, our stories will be written about and possibly movies made about us. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sitting there like going, it's so true. Because when we look at history today, there are movies about Paul and Peter and Jesus. And like, there's all these movies out there about the apostles, not just Jesus himself, right? There's a bunch of stuff out there, right? And I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, imagine if we had movies made about ourselves, how exciting would it be? Or how, I mean, even for me right now, I'm like, how boring would the end of my movie be, where it'd be like this nerdy movie of me going through the process of trying to make this podcast? Like, that would be so boring, right? That would be like those like Zuckerberg type movies, like, oh, and I had to make Facebook or whatever it was. And I think to myself, man, I would have a very boring end to my movie. And then I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? I could make it more dramatic. And of course, this is the second time I brought this up, and I would have, like, at the end of my life, in my 70s or 80s, I would die a glorious death fighting with a bear, like a grizzly bear, right, with like a pocket knife, and then it would be a big battle, and eventually I would die. But of course, I'm not sure who would be the actor that would play me, but they would have to have huge muscles, really, really tall, handsome, and stuff like that too. And I'd be fighting the bear, I would lose, and I'd die. And then, what's so funny? Like, when you start to have these, like, the conversations that are, they're not really real, but they're kind of just fun. For some reason, we just kind of go further and further. Like, we would just start talking about it more like, but then you would resurrect and your spirit would have on armor like on Gladiator, right? And I'd be like, oh, and it would even be like 300 and my muscles would be even bigger. And I would scream like, this is Sparta, right? But then again, I think at this moment right now, I have more of a secret man crush on Tom Cruise because of Mission Impossible, and I would come back as Ethan Hunt from the IMF and totally do crazy stunts and stuff. But, you know, they wouldn't really be a stunt since I'm a spirit and I can do things anyways, like fly and move around and stuff. But, man, I feel like I'm talking like a girl. So then this would happen, and then this would happen, and then this would happen. Oh my goodness, and that'd be so cool. And, you know, the most important part is my uniform would be so cute and so pretty, but I gotta make sure that I have really nice shoes on too, and my handbag matches my shoes and my belt. It would be so cool. So awesome. Either way. But, you know, I'm so stupid sometimes. Tom Cruise, for me, he is cool. He is so cool. Right now, after watching Mission Impossible on Monday, I'm like, man, he is so old school action hero, 61 years old, gives me something to look forward to in my 60s. He is doing so much, even at that age. You know, I have this little man crush starting in my heart for him. His last two movies were so good. And even my friend was saying, now I don't think Scientology is that bad anymore because Tom Cruise is so cool. But there is another movie I'm going to be watching soon. On the 22nd, in the opening weekend. I already bought tickets because they came out really, really early. And this is, right now, he's probably top 3 favorite directors of all time. Like, you know, Steven Spielberg's up there, Scorsese's up there. This is, you know, who else would be up there? But I like the action movies too. Like, but he's top 3 for me, for sure. Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is like, he is just a different level of director. And it's people say this is going to be the movie of the year. I already bought tickets. A bunch of us from church are going to go together. It's called Oppenheimer. It's about the atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb, right? And so if you guys don't know who Christopher Nolan is, for me, the movie that really got me to know him the best, like when I first got into him, was Memento. Do you guys remember that movie, Memento? Like, the whole movie's done backwards. The scenes are done backwards, right? And that's like, oh, that's so interesting. And then after, the big one that really hit me was the Dark Knight trilogy. And I would say until this day right now, there is no superhero movie that has been done as good as the Dark Knight trilogy. I don't think there's anyone. Even the Avengers, nothing comes close to the Dark Knight trilogy, especially the middle one, when the Joker's in it. That one is the most frightening, and it is done so well. So, for me, the Dark Knight trilogy was everything. Then, of course, Inception came out. That's Christopher Nolan. Interstellar, Tenet, and now Oppenheimer's going to... Oh, he also did 1917, I believe. No, Dunkirk. He did Dunkirk, and that was a great movie also. But Oppenheimer, looking forward to this one. Amazing storyteller, Christopher Nolan. And I've already bought tickets for next Saturday. And I am so looking forward to that one. Yeah. Gosh, that call out in the comment section for me saying either way. I was just about to say it again. And I was like, gosh, I got to catch myself on this because it's one of those comfort words that I use. For me... Because, you know, I am a speaker and I speak, you know, I do a lot of speeches and stuff. One of the things that I learned was to have like a catch word that I would use instead of like those ones sound worse. When you're like, well, I was thinking, yeah, and like that sounds worse. That you would have catch words you'd put in there instead, like either way, or I would use so. So let's get into the next one. Either way, let's find out what's next. And I would put in the words instead so it wouldn't be unprofessional. You know, it's a weird thing. I just said twice. That is so weird for me right now because I never really use those. I just did it again. Oh, weird. You know what? I'm too conscious of this. I'm so conscious right now of this that I think that that person in the comments should just give me, he said $100 for every episode I don't use either way. I think instead, to give me more inspiration and motivation, he or she should just donate $100 per episode to inspire me and motivate me not to do it. Well, what do you think about that? So, see, I use so here, right? I had a call with a member. I'm going to go a little bit further on this. And this is like getting to some meats of some things that were happening over the last couple of days. And I had this call with a member, a good friend of mine. I used to live with this person over there in Korea. And they are a blessed family. But since March, with all the crazy chaos going on, the wife is now no longer really subscribing to Providence. And they're a blessed family. They have 2 kids. It's quite shocking to hear these things happening, right? For instance, in smaller countries, you may not see this happen as often, but imagine you're in a country where there's like 2,000 blessed families. You're going to have things pop up out of nowhere. Providence is not a place like the world where, you know, there's a 53% divorce rate, but there's going to be divorce. There's going to be things that do happen that are not, that are kind of like the world, but it's not going to be at the same rate. And this is why Providence is such a better place to be in. But we had a very, very heart-to-heart discussion of what can he's like, I need some advice. So I don't know what I should be doing. And I myself told him like, hey, I am not married. And it's hard for me to understand the full situation that you're going through. And, you know, it's really saddening to hear that the family has spiritually broken up. No, they're still together. They're still married, everything else, but they're spiritually broken up. And the question was, what is the next thing? What is the thing that we should do next in this marriage? And in the end, I thought to myself, you know, regardless of what his wife thinks, he's her husband and the father of their 2 children. And the situation is so much more complex than just, well, they don't believe, then just split up. You shouldn't be together kind of thing. And this sometimes becomes the oversimplified version of it. And I think it's something we should also be thinking in a much more complex way. It's easy to say split up. It's easy to say divorce. This is the way the world does it. But in the end, the marriage is based on the vow of love, which is to love during good and bad times, through thick and thin, good and bad health. And when I think about how God treats us in our marriage together with Him when we come to this history, God does this, like, look at the way God treats us, regardless of how much we didn't believe or were, you know, doing really bad or sometimes fell away for a few months or a few years. He was always there, always loving us. And we see that this is the truest form of love. And in the end, we too have to love until the end, no matter what, until there is nothing left. And no one knows whether his wife will come back or not. No one knows, but there is a chance. And the greatest thing we can do is to love, pray for her, love her, be there for her. And when the time comes, there will be an opportunity, just like how God waits on each and every one of us. Right? It's a vow. We're learning about love through this history. And just because something doesn't come the way that we want, I don't think giving up is the best way to do it. We have to love how God loves. You know, it's a difficult time for some families now too. We have to understand this is actually happening. And I really hope it kind of helps us to understand how important faith is when it comes to marriage. Like, think about it. When it comes to marriage, faith for us should be one of the top priorities. I would have if I thought to myself, if I was in that situation, I would have such a difficult time. But this is the reality of what's happening even inside this history. And it kind of, it reminds me of all the stuff we've been discussing this week. This topic of the week is male evangelism and blessing in marriage, all these other different things that are popping up. It's a difficult topic. Some people are okay with it and some people aren't. But we definitely need to work on it together, because we even though some people are okay with it, it's not ideal. If you think about it this way, it's not ideal. Like there was another comment, I thought it was a great comment, and I think this is probably the healthiest way to look at it is someone wrote, I feel that most girls are not desperate to that extent to want to marry just any guy. Of course, not any guy, it kind of means like we're talking in the blessing. So these guys are not just any guys anyways. But this is more so about the right match for them. And what does it mean, the right match? I think a lot of people who haven't been to the blessing may not understand what it means, the right match or the right person. Like, what does that mean? Because are we thinking that there is one singular person that we need to be with? Is that what we're thinking? Like this is more romanticized where there is the one that I have to be with. And the answer is no. How would I know when I've never been to a blessing? Well, I've never been in the blessing, but I've been to a blessing. And you're like, what does that mean? I was Sunseem's bodyguard during the time there was a blessing that happened, I believe, in 1999. I went to two of them. And the one I remember the most is the one I went to when I was Sunseem's security, and I was in the house and I was watching, and I'd see how Sunseem educate and stuff like that too. And what Sunseem said is like, you could, technically, he says, you could blindfold all the girls, all the guys, spin them around 10 times, and whichever guy or girl they touched first would be married, and that would be okay. And you're like, what? And he's like, yeah, it would be fine. Right? We're all in the same history. We have the same beliefs. And, these are all these other things that he talked about. But then he said, however, there are levels of matches. There is the A level, the B level, the C level, the D level, and so on. Right? There's different levels of matches that you can have. A level is going to be the most compatible. B level is, B level, C level, whatever it is. And we have to realize it's not so much like if we think too much like the world is like, who is the one? Where in this history, we're already all in this history right now, and we are all believing in the same word, and we're all trying our best to do the things that we need to do, right? But if we're thinking there is the one, I think that might be a little bit difficult for us to kind of compute in our heads. It might be a little bit stressing. But I do feel that a lot of people, if they haven't been to the blessing, it would be hard for them to really understand what it means, right? If you've been to it, and then you say, I don't think girls are desperate, then I would be more in agreement, right? And this person also wrote in, even when we think about the reasons for marriage, it's not just about fulfilling individual will, but it's fulfilling God's will in history. And that is such a big point, I think, right? The will, it's about fulfilling God's will. And since the Holy Spirit is the one who matches people together, who are we to say that a person we are matched to is not good enough for us? Human beings only see and judge physically, but Trinity's thoughts are different, and they see things spiritually and fundamentally. And I agree and disagree at the same time with that concept. So what we see is, if you think about that time where Sunseem was in China, and remember he prayed and he really wanted meat in his soup. And what happened was, when it was his turn, like there was none of the meat was left, but like little morsels popped up, and he was able to get these small, like really tiny chunks of meat into his soup. And the thing he realized is God is working with the situation that we have. So the situation that we have is the situation that we have right now with the ratio of guys and girls, and the Holy Trinity will work according to that situation, which means imagine if the situation was we are completely good. We have more than enough guys, more than enough girls. People should be able to find someone, right? In that situation, it might be even more different, because if the Holy Spirit doesn't inspire us, we'd be like, oh, okay, that's good. That's fine. Right? Because it's like, yeah, there's more than enough for everyone. No one's really desperate or whatever it is. But yet we're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I didn't really get any inspiration this time. But we need to realize is God and the Holy Trinity works according to the situation, which means if the situation is better, then what what the inspiration and who we're matched with changes too. It's not going to be like at this situation now, there's only 2 guys and 35 girls, and this is the best of the best kind of thing. Because there's way more than just, are they the perfect match for me? Because later on, age comes into the consideration. Being able to bear children comes into consideration, right? There's a lot more other things that have to kind of be matched at the same time. So I agree with it, saying this is by the Holy Spirit, of course. And to say that, could you say that you got someone worse than you could have? And the answer is no, because it's from the Holy Trinity. But yes, at the same time, because if the situation was different and there were 10,000 guys, it would be different. Because it's according to situation and circumstance. And that's why it's not always so cut and dry. Right? It's not always so cut and dry of it's going to, it would always be this way no matter what. Like I wouldn't even be able to guarantee that you would still be matched with the same person if there were 10,000 guys. You know what I mean? So that's why I agree and disagree at the same time. For the situation, agree. But if the situation changed and there were more guys, I would disagree. Like I wouldn't think it would have to be the same way. And that's why we need to remedy the situation as best as possible. Right? This person also wrote, even though not everyone can fulfill their desires to get married, I feel that then all the more we should realize the value of spiritual purpose of creation and be grateful that everyone can fulfill the spiritual purpose of creation, which is eternal blessing. Agree. But the thing we have to understand is everyone is fulfilling the spiritual purpose of creation. Everyone is. Regardless if you're married or not, you're all fulfilling purpose of creation, the eternal blessing, right? And this last point was good. I feel that marriage in Provi is not an entitlement. It is a blessing from God. Agree. So we should not have resentment even if we are not able to receive this blessing. So yeah, I'm going to say it is a very difficult situation. And I would say that this is a very mature way to think about it. But I feel that it may be a little too idealistic or maybe unrealistic. Right? And not everyone will be able to think this way throughout their entire lifetime. Like I said, the younger you are, there's more hope in the future where you're not sitting there like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? But the older and older you get, the more you would think about it in a different way. And I would say this I'm not saying this, I'm saying that I'm going to kind of generalize girls for 1 second, right? And that is, females are a lot more emotional than men generally. And emotion definitely overrides rationale and logic. And in the future, when it's a little bit more emotional where you want to get married, it's going to, like the future, like when you hit the future, when time begins to really tick, this is when people's thoughts begin to change. Like I've seen plenty of girls when they were younger don't want kids, but all of a sudden when they hit like 35, 36, they all of a sudden start thinking to themselves they want kids. Like changes. Well, how you think right now will be very different from how you think about things in 6 months and next year and 5 years down the road. So I do think it's a very mature way of thinking about it. And I do think we have to work on this in a different way. And if we are too mature about something, then we may not actually take action and remedy the situation. And that's why I do think it's a time for us to say, yeah, this is an issue and we got to fix it and we got to do something about this. And if we don't, there's going to be plenty of problems in the future. And like I said, this entire week, there's going to be a lot of negative outcomes if this is not fixed. A lot of negative outcomes, right? And I hope that we can work on this together. Now, this is something that I don't think is a very, very good discussion for comments and a podcast. And I'll give you an example for this. Especially my podcast, because I'm the only one speaking. In the future, it's probably better. Like that's why the Man Cave and Provipuff are probably better for these discussions. But I definitely think that this is a discussion for you and your churches. It's something that you should bring up to your churches, especially if it's something that's really important to you, which I think it is important to everyone because it's the purpose of creation. Everyone is supposed to fulfill the spiritual purpose of creation. That's guaranteed down the line, right? Everyone, doesn't matter if you're married or not, star, marriage, whatever it is, everyone fulfills the spiritual purpose of creation. However, the vast majority of people, vast majority, are going to fulfill the physical purpose of creation. Like, one thing I don't like about what society tells us today is, I don't like it how society tells you that it's not important to get married and have kids. Like, too many people are saying that you don't need marriage and you don't need a family. And focus more on your career. It's because the world does not know the word, meaning they don't understand, they have not learned the purpose of creation and how important this is. There's a very, very interesting book, and if you guys know who Douglas Murray is an intellectual, and he studies history also, and he said one of the biggest signs, one of the common signs of a falling empire, like the Roman Empire, like the Neo-Assyrian Empire, Babylonian Empire, like any of these large empires, and even America is considered an empire right now, one of the common signs, a sign that you see that you know that the empire is going to start to fall, is the breaking of the nuclear family. And that's actually what's happening in America right now, is they're trying to break the nuclear family, right? The ultimate goal that we're trying to figure out to ourselves, and we have to keep reminding ourselves is to create a family of heaven on earth. Like, this is part of the path to create heaven on earth. This is part of that path. Remember, the 3 stages is, number 1 is be fruitful, focus on yourself, make yourself better, make yourself into a man or a woman of God. And when you make yourself, the next stage is the family heaven. And these two people that are focused on God come together and create a family heaven on earth that leads to that you create a family and your children become people centered on God. And when the families come together, they create a nation of God. And when that nations of God come together, it creates a world of God. This is how the kingdom of God on earth is created. If we stop and only think that creating heaven on earth is only about me, as long as I'm a godly person, it's going to create a heaven on earth. No, then we've lost the concept of the purpose of creation. It is godly people coming together to create a family heaven. People get to see what families are really made of, and then what happens to them? They create godly children. You see, if only people are stuck on, as long as I'm godly, I'm fine, then we have not made an impact on the next generation. Because remember, the next generation is affected by their parents, their spiritual genetics, how they were treated, if they believed in God or not. That plays a huge role. And this is why that family heaven becomes such a great thing, that it's not a small thing to leave your career and start a family. It's not a small thing to raise a godly family. It's not small at all. It's a huge thing that we have to think about. And if we lose that, the value and importance of the family heaven, we cannot make the kingdom of God on earth. It is impossible with just godly individuals. It's impossible. The way that God has made the purpose of creation, it starts at the individual, then the individuals of God make families, and the families make nations, the nations make the world. That's how it's supposed to work. But the way that the world is telling us and the way that Satan has taken hold of the messages is trying to break the nuclear family and make people think that, no, I'm fine on my own. And the answer is no. Then you've lost sight of the purpose of creation. It is that much bigger than we think. And this is why, like, one thing Sunstein did say is stars will end when he dies. There's no more stars after his death. 0. Which means that after his death, who's left? It's going to be mainly people who are married. Like, it's going to be even now, the vast majority are going to be married and families. Vast majority. And as time goes on, it's going to be more and more married people. That's how it's going to be. Because that's the purpose of creation. So I do think that we cannot lose the value of this purpose of creation and understand why it's so important rather than just fulfilling a personal need. No. This is the fulfillment of the history of God. And that's why it shouldn't be okay to just say, well, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. No, that's how big and important it is. And that's why we need to fix this. And we need to be those that discuss this. And we need to be those that find more guys. And we need to be able to solve that issue that is not being solved in Christianity or Providence right now at this moment. So for me, that's one of the big things I want to talk about today, just to say this is the end of the week. This discussion is not closed, but we have to get our minds back into what is the most important thing. Why is this so important for us? This purpose of creation, the blessing, right? And we have to bring ourselves back to the purpose of creation lesson. And once we learn that, we'll be like, got it. That makes sense once again. This is what we're doing. We're fulfilling the will of God, the purpose of creation. All right? Either way, so that really, we're getting kind of heavy into this, but there's lots more to talk about, and I'm sure it'll be talked about in the Man Cave and the Provipuff also too. Okay? So let's move into the first break of the day.
I believe without a doubt
All right, so let's get into today's word study. And every Friday we have the Wednesday message word study. And I hope that everyone enjoyed your Wednesday services. For me, it's still Thursday over here. So this is why I can't do my Wednesday message recap on Thursdays, because I'm recording this a day earlier. So I just heard it last night. So let's get into this week's Wednesday message. And the title was a little bit different, very, very similar, but you only need to think of and fulfill the will. So it becomes even more kind of like a command. Don't look at anything else. Let's just fulfill the will from John 6, chapter 38, John chapter 6, verses 38 to 40. There's going to be a lot of proverbs that are given at this time. And when I heard this message, they weren't like numbered. It was kind of just like free flowing. So I'm not even sure what the numbers are. So I'm not going to be saying like, oh, I remember this first proverb or second proverb. It was very like it flowed very naturally. So that's why I don't have any numbers or anything else like that too. The parts that I liked in the very beginning of the Wednesday message is the intro where it's seasons change. Like we're in the situation where seasons are changing. It is monsoon season over there in Korea. And I like the concept of seasons changing because especially when it comes to the situation that we're going through right now in Providence, like for instance, we go through a rainy storm, seasons come and seasons go, right? Seasons will pass and we will overcome and we're going to pass through this tribulation pretty soon. And I think it's something that we need to think about in our own lives is, one thing I do like to talk, when I talk to guys, and like I talk to the like campus or the SS over here in Vancouver. One thing I do like to tell them and kind of like speak to them about is being people of responsibility and like being men of this history. And one thing about we have to realize about being responsible people that are held accountable is regardless of what is happening, you still got to do what you need to do. Like this is like for me, I'll pass this on to more to men. Like, yeah, guess what? Things are going to be crappy at times. Things are not going to be that great all the time. You're not going to feel like you want to go to work. You're not going to feel like you have to, like, oh, I don't really feel like I want to do this. That's not the point. The point is fulfilling your responsibility. And I think that's something that we have to think about when it comes to the will of God also. Feelings are going to come and go too. And in most cases, your feelings are not right. Like how many times have you been deceived by your own thoughts and your own feelings? Just because you feel something doesn't mean it's the correct thing. And I really feel that this message is the same as, we're going through a difficult time. We are. We're going to go through a difficult time. And kind of like what I said in the first segment is the one big advantage that girls have over guys is way more emotional, way more empathetic. They can feel much better than guys. They're able to read people better than guys can, right? That's just one of the big advantages of being more emotional and more empathetic. However, the disadvantage of being more emotional is if something happens and you don't feel like doing something or an emotion overtakes you, you will stop doing what you're supposed to do. Yeah, I believe that more women will step down from leadership than men in this situation. And from what I've heard so far from many different countries, from those that have stepped down, it's way more women than men. Actually, I haven't even heard of a guy stepping down yet, but I've only heard of women stepping down. And it's not because I'm saying that women are worse or anything else like that. It's just part of the nature of a woman. Remember, I'm generalizing because I know there's some women who have zero empathy. I know. And there's some guys who have a lot of empathy too and are very, very emotional. But generally speaking, so I'm not here to, this is totally not like a shots fired at women or something like that. It's just what it is. What Sunseem said one time is, the reason why Sunseem says the problem with girls is he'll have a girl doing a mission and then out of nowhere they'll just get up and stop. They'll just quit in the middle, right? They're going through something, so they're just going to quit. They're not going to do it. I can't do this anymore. And they leave. Guys, on the other hand, regardless of the situation or how hard it gets, they're going to fulfill what they need to do. And they're more, because they're less emotional. And it's something that I do think that we have to understand and think about even better too, right? You only need to do All you need to do at this time is fulfill the will. It's a difficult time. Just got to keep fulfilling, do your responsibility. It might seem like, I guess to some people who are more emotional, might feel like it's crude, or might feel it's like too strong and strict, but this is life. You don't do that at work. At work, all of a sudden, you're going to be like, I don't feel like working today. Oh, I'm just going through something. You're not going to just quit, or you're not just going to stop, right? It's not, life doesn't work that way. And I think even when it comes to our faith, we all have to kind of have the attributes of men and women. Like, we need to be the sensitive ones. We need to be the ones that have empathy. We need to feel it emotionally when we hear the words, to feel it in our hearts too. But we also need to be like guys in one case where, regardless of the situation, we do what we need to do. And seasons are changing. Seasons will come, seasons are going to go. And we need to be those that fulfill the will, regardless of what's happening around the world around us, right? And I guess like the number one thing is, when I was looking at the first section of the Proverbs that were being read, the most important part is, guess what? We need to fulfill the will, which means you need to know what the will is first. You got to know what it is, right? If you don't know the will, how could you fulfill it in the first place? And, we need to know the will by listening to the word. And once we know the will, like another thing that I think is very important for us to understand in our hearts too is to know, just because we know the will means we know what we need to do, right? And once again, coming back to that original point is, once you know what to do, it doesn't matter what you feel. It doesn't matter what you think. Once you know, like, this is what I'm supposed to do, that's it. It's done. And one thing that we have to understand is, why is listening to the word such a big and important thing for all of us? Because when you listen to the word, it also creates thoughts in your mind. You listen to it and you start thinking about those things from the word. And when you start thinking about those things from the word, guess what happens? Your body is controlled by your thoughts, which is controlled by your soul, which is controlled by your spirit, right? So when we see this, the listening of the word is the first part that matters more than anything else, because you need to know what the will is, and then your body, your actions will move according to how your thoughts are, right? And that is all happening through the words of God, right? So in the world today, we look at, I like this really, really big point, is the life of meaninglessness and emptiness. Because people don't know. Because people don't know, they live the empty life. They only think about the body. It's about eating and living, marrying, having children, and then dying. And the great point that was made is, when you start looking at animals, they're no different than people. They do the same things as human beings. Fundamentally the same. Eating, living, mating, and then dying. This is why life becomes so empty when you think only about the body itself. And this is why one of the things that Sunstein talks about through the Bible is, at the time of Adam and Eve, when before they committed the fall, what was it like before they committed the fall? Well, before they committed the fall, their spirits were living and they were connected to God. And the one rule that God gave was, don't eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will die. And basically they ate it and they died spiritually, which means that their connection to God was severed, which means that their spirit is dead. So if you think about this, the one thing that human beings have over animals and over nature is the spirit itself. Whether it's animals, whether it's trees, whatever it is, animals only reach the soul level. So what happened was, after Adam and Eve committed the fall, their spirit died. So now they become at the level of an animal. We become exactly the same. Why? Because we don't think about, the spirit is dead. The only thing we have remaining is the body and the soul, which animals also have. So what happened? What was the symbolism of that? Well, the symbolism of that was, after the fall, what did God do? God, if you look at like Genesis chapter 3, verse 21, God made garments of skin, animal skin, for Adam and his wife, and clothed them. And one thing we know about clothes is, clothes represent who you are. If you're wearing the clothes of human beings, your own naked skin, you're a human being, because their spirits were alive. But the moment their spirit died, they are now equal to animals. And that's why they were given animal clothes, because that's the level they're at right now until their spirit comes back to life. right? And when we look at this, that's what the meaninglessness of life is like, is when you only look at the body, right? And this is what happens when people don't believe in God. Think about this. If you think about it even more deeply, how could Sunsim, how could he continue this life of suffering, constantly being accused, going through suffering, people coming against him? How can he continue? Because he knows the Spirit clearly. He knows there's something bigger. He knows God. He knows there's a will. When we know that there's something greater than what we're going through right now, we're able to get through it. Just like a parent will suffer through their job because it supports their children. And we have to understand is, if you don't understand the Spirit, if you're not connected to God, you're not going to have a reason to go through this suffering. You're going to just think that everything is meaningless and it's empty. And that's why I love that point, because that's one of the reasons why people go through that meaninglessness and they feel like, what's life for? There's no purpose of creation. But once you understand the purpose of creation, it changes everything. So I really, really like that point. And it's one of those points that most people do talk about during the 3 divisions lesson also, right? Another really big proverb I liked was about making yourself. So some people might be shocked by this, but if you don't make yourself while you're living, you can still make yourself in the spiritual world. And people are like, what? But I thought it's the life that we live here. Is that important? And the answer is, it is crazy important what you do right now in your life while you're living. Why? Because what you're capable of doing and how quickly you're able to change in the body right now is 10,000 times faster than the spiritual world. So the way you have to look at it is in terms of time. The physical world is kind of shortened. Like, you look at all of eternity shortened into 90 years. So that's like what the physical world is. So what you can do in this 90 years is what it's going to take eternity for you to do in the spiritual world. So sometimes like, hey, if you're walking one step at a, let's say your progress is 1 step a day or let's say 1 meter a day in the physical realm, that's your progress. In the spiritual world, that would be like 1 centimeter or even 1 millimeter in the spiritual world. That's how much harder it is. And that's why we need to make ourselves right now. The wrong thoughts, the wrong thinking, all those like, oh, I wish it was like this. Oh, why is it like this? With the complaining, the grumbling, and our mind sometimes snaps into kind of a bad thoughts and bad ways of thinking and really bad habits of how we live. We got to change it now, because it's that much harder in the spiritual world. It's that much harder. So, I think that for me, that was a great point. Reminded me of some of the stuff that Sunsim talked about a long time ago too, right? Another point that I thought was great was when Sunsim talked about people not being if you're not at the right level as God, you just can't see or feel how great something really and truly is, because our level is just way too low. And the example he gave was people who come to Wolmyeongdong and they don't feel shocked to the point that they faint. To that point. And that reminds me of a story that Sunsim gave when Sunsim heard the word and he was so shocked by it and he fainted. And he's like, oh my gosh, this word is so amazing. So what did he do? So what he did was, when he first went to Seoul, he had he was teaching the lessons, and in his bag, he would always have these 2 medicine balls, like this medicine that he gives to people, right? Because he thought that if people listened to this word, they'd be so shocked that they would faint. But what he would do is he would take that medicine from his bag and put it in their mouth so they don't faint. Like, that's how much Sunsim really values the word. He knows it to that level. And he's not even at the level of God to know it at that level, right? But we have to understand too is, imagine if we were at the level of God, how great, what the difference of how God sees Wolmyeongdong compared to what we see. If we knew correctly, think about that, you would faint on the spot. That's the level that we have to see things in. And that's why we have to be way more spiritual than we are right now. And I looked at it as like, it's so true. Our levels are so low. We can't even see how great something really is. And in the same way, in the message, it's like, in the same way, it's when Jesus was living on the earth 2,000 years ago, no one was shocked seeing him. When they don't know him, they don't get shocked, right? They don't faint. They don't think their life has been completely fulfilled. Like, if you look at Anna the prophetess, and I think Simeon also, they were promised by God that they would see the Messiah before they died. After they saw just baby Jesus, they're like, my life is complete. It's complete now. And we need to know the same thing's happening in this time period too. What does that mean? We are in this time period. How do we see the man of mission? Do we understand the value of him as we should? So I looked at that and I was like, yeah, I think sometimes we lose the value much quicker than we think. So, this message this week, the Wednesday message is about as much as you know. So it's like God's will. As much as you know, you're going to fulfill. In the same way too, when it comes to God, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Trinity, Jesus, you're only going to communicate with them as much as you know them. As much as you recognize how great they are. Because put it this way, if you saw someone really, really great, you would want to hang out with them. You want to talk to them. You want to see what they're doing. You want to learn from them and stuff like that too. But if we knew and recognized God, then what would happen? We'd be like, I got to talk to him more. He's allowing me to talk to him. He wants me to talk to him. He wants me to come closer to him. Completely different. It's about knowing. As much as you have learned, right? As much as you have learned is as much as you'll be able to do. As much as you can understand. Because even when it comes to understanding, you can't understand until you learn first. Like if you look at math equations and you never learn math, you'll have no idea what these numbers and symbols and signs actually are. But when you learn it first, then you're able to understand. That's why learn the will first, right? The one who knows and believes are the ones that are absolutely blessed. Another point another proverb that I thought was really good was about God and Jesus not telling secrets. Right? They're not going to tell us the secrets. They're not going to tell us what's actually going, what the will is at that point. They just tell us what to do. And the point was, you'll only be able to fulfill the will only as much as you know the will. And the way that God sees it is, if I just give you the will, if I let you know what's going on, it's like giving you the deed to the land or the house. Like that's how important it is to tell you what the actual will is if you don't value, if you don't understand, if you don't know it clearly. The will is that precious. It's only when someone absolutely perfectly knows the will, they will be able to, then God will give the will and do the will through that person. And this person is actually going to take action on it. So sometimes, like, think about this. We may ask ourselves, well, why, I don't know what the will is. What does God want for me in my life? It's because you're not learning the will. You don't know. You're not praying. You're not pleading. You're not coming to God and saying, God, I need to know the will for me. What is the will for me right now? And then once you know it perfectly, then God will give you the will and let you take action on the will. But if we're just sit there like, God, I don't know what to do in my life. What should I do in my life? It's not someone who wants the will. It's not someone who wants to know it. We have to change the way that we think when it comes to really understanding the will of ourselves, because God's not going to give it to us until we know it perfectly. We won't take action on it until we know it perfectly. When someone perfectly knows, then the will be given. Like God will give the will through that person and lets people take action on it, right? So that's something I think it's a very, very important too, right? God's going to keep those secrets until the person who knows it clearly, perfectly, and values it, right? That's how long he's going to keep it. And if you think about it right now, they went over kind of like the parable of the hidden treasure. Like the treasure came up a lot in this middle part of the message, but it's like the man of mission is the treasure, right? The person who became Jesus' body, the person who delivers the will, that person is the treasure. Why? Because How else would you learn the will except through the person that delivers the will, right? The person that became the body of the Lord. And this is why if you want the treasure, if the man of mission is the treasure that gives the will, if you want the will, if you want the man of mission, it's about knowing. You have to know it. And that's why even the man of mission, think about him. Why would he want to give you or why would he spend more time with you? Why would he want to do more things with you? Why would he have more interest in you if you don't even know what the will is? He's going to work together with those that know what the will is. There was a great video in the middle of it too, when it talks about the different trees, right? Working on the trees, and people work on the trees. If they don't know, then they would ruin the artwork of God. But it was only after it was fully grown. This is when it was made perfectly by someone who knows how to, the tree better, right? So I went through a lot of different pine trees and rocks in there too, and it was all about finding the treasure, right? Where there's like the struggle pine tree, where the roots could have been like, they could have buried the roots, but 90% of the roots are exposed, and that was the special characteristic of that tree. Also look at like the camel rock. Man, it's like it took 6 months with 10 to 20 people digging up this rock. Huge. I think it's supposed to be like 500 tons. A huge work of art made by God. So I think that is something that, it's a matter of, because we don't know, we're unable to really understand it or value it. So this point here I thought was really good too. Don't just talk about something without developing. That's just a hopeful statement. Talk after you make it, right? This is the history of actualizing, the history of making things. It's not a dream or a vision, it is reality. What does that mean? Don't just talk about it. Don't just talk about, oh, we should develop this, we should develop that. It's just a hopeful statement. You have to make it first and then talk about it, right? You gain only after you do something. It only becomes real, not after conversation. It becomes real when you do it. When you're hungry, it's only real when you actually eat. It's not talking about what you're going to cook. It's about what are you actually eating. That's what reality is. So there's a lot of different parts of the Wednesday message I thought were very, very good. Let's see, there's another point that I was going to bring up too. Yeah, last one was about God will always use what is appropriate as an example, right? So these are like revelations that come from nature, parables that God uses in the Bible. And one of the things that the message said was, well, think about it. Why does God keep bringing up Warmingdom? Because it is absolutely appropriate, made according to God's plan. And this is why he could talk about it all day. And this is why we're able to realize from Warmingdom. And if you think about it, this is why we can't trust in people. Meaning, people change. Like, trust in people means like, look at what happened this year. Sometimes we put too much trust in people, but people change. And this is why, when you learn in the parables lecture, that God uses nature because nature doesn't change. It has their innate quality and character, right? So you can talk about trees. Trees will always be trees 1,000 years later, 3,000 years later, 5,000 years later. The characteristic of trees will never change. But people will change. And that's why God won't talk about people until after they die, because that's when everything ends. And then he can say, look what he's done, or look what mistake that he made. So the things that are made by God, like Warmingdom, the nature that is around us, it's shown to us as revelations for ourselves. And this is when we really realize deeply, is when we see it in reality. And it's really frustrating if we don't really understand or know it well. God always uses what is appropriate as an example, right? And that's why, we'll always hear in Korean is iwagachi, or in the same way. In the same way, it's like this. It's like a tree. It's like a farmer. It's like a fisherman. And the reason why we're learning it this way is because it's so frustrating to God when we don't really understand what is going, like what he's actually saying. And this is why he has to say it in a way that we can understand at a much, much higher level, right? So like the Proverbs that were given on Wednesday, really, really deep. I know that you might have some other Proverbs that you really enjoyed too, but go ahead, put them in the comments below. We'd love to hear the different ones that you thought. The Proverbs, they were enlightening. And I hope that all of us will fulfill the will that we were told to fulfill regardless of the situation, circumstance, environment, or what is happening around us, all right? So I hope that everyone, do not get distracted, but I hope that everyone will be able to fulfill what God has intended for them, all right? So there it is, guys. That is the Wednesday message word study. Hope you guys really enjoyed that. So let's move into the second break of the day. Okay, so let's get into the final segment of today and for the entire week. And of course, we have Until the End Mental Health Podcast with Daniel Baker over there in Korea right now. Only 19 years old, doing a great, amazing job. I have lots of respect for him. He's back in his mission, helping out the SS over there in Korea. So prayers go out to him too. Today, what's he going to talk about? He's going to talk about beating loneliness. And this is something that's a very, very big topic right now in America. Surgeon General, the U.S. Surgeon General just said there's an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And I did talk about that a couple days ago, about it's equivalent to 15 cigarettes a day, right? And he's talking about how to beat loneliness. And he's also going to respond to some of the comments that came out on YouTube too. So everyone, please welcome all the way from Korea. This is Daniel Baker with Until the End.
everyone, welcome back to the Do It Until the End podcast. Now today, I hope you guys are doing amazing. Hope you guys are doing well mentally, physically, and spiritually with the Lord. So yeah, today I feel kind of amazing. To be perfectly honest, I have a lot of work to do. So even these off times, like recording for the podcast, really feels like, I wouldn't say it's a chore, right? It actually feels more, it feels more rewarding, and it feels more like resting, right? Talking to people even though it's on the internet and we're not actually having a conversation, you guys are listening to my amazing voice. Even though it's not a real conversation, it actually feels like I'm having a lot of fun because it's not actually quote unquote work. And there's a lot of things I have to do with SS, and those things have been really preoccupied with those tasks. And to be perfectly honest, last week was very difficult for me, and I was like, what changed within last week and this week, right? I was asking these massive questions, and yeah, what changed? The mood last week was very depressive. I was also having a lot of like stress, panic attacks. But this week, I feel kind of amazing. I'm able to work hard on my SS stuff, and but I really realized that last week, I didn't get the basics down. And when you don't get your basics, when your basic life is kind of like unstable, and you don't have anything to fall back towards, then it's very hard to be happy, and it's very easy to become in a depressed state. And that's what I realized. Like last week, I didn't have a car, I didn't have any family around me, and everything changed, right? This week, during the weekends, my family came and stayed over for a couple of days. My mother's staying here with me because she's helping me get my driver's license. And I got, in Korea, there's like a written test. A written test I did I passed, but for the actual, like the pre-driving test, I got 100%. So I'm really thankful for my mom, helping me out with all that stuff. And so I'm getting a car now, and in that process, right? That means I have transportation, I can practice driving, aka just ride around and do the chores I need to do. I also have a lot of amazing food, so my mom, she cut up a whole watermelon for me to just enjoy for the whole week. It's a lot of watermelon, and it's something that would feed a good 6-7 people, but I'm having it all by myself, so I don't know what to do with all this watermelon. And I have air conditioning, I have some fun things I can do, a lot of good books. And when I have the basics down, I'm more happy. There's no lonely feeling, or I'm not depressed. You're more happy when you have your basics down, right? When you have a car, and when you have transportation to other people, and if we have good, strong relationships with people, we're able to not feel loneliness because we spend time with these people. We're able to go to the gym, or have transportation, and go to coffee shops, and work on relationships. Now, if you don't have these basics down, then it's very easy for Satan to work and use this temptation and use this crack in the armor to really make a fatal blow, right? It's very easy to think, it's okay, I was just depressed for a little bit. But to be honest, if you're depressed for 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2-3 months, which I've had my fair share of, then it's very hard to rebound and get into a positive mood. Again, it's harder, right? It's not impossible, but it's harder. So yeah, having your basic needs is something that I realize to get over loneliness. Now, I want to see, there's a couple amazing comments from last week's video or last week's podcast that I want to read to you guys and give you my thoughts on during this podcast segment. Now, the first commenter said this: I want to give Daniel a car as a gift. Loneliness? Well, I don't usually get lonely, but I feel lonely when I felt that there's no one to share my shimjang with. In that case, if I tell God everything honestly with prayer, then there are times when it will get better. And if it doesn't get better right away, I think it will be solved later. Or I feel lonely when I'm far away from the Trinity. So when I feel lonely, I first doubt my relationship with God. Yeah, this is something that, I was talking to my mother about, and she had said something amazing about loneliness. The only person or the only being that can really cure loneliness, cure depression, is God, right? God is the only one who knows your needs fully and can provide them to you. And if you're reliant on God, and if you're reliant on, or if you're having a much more closer relationship with God, then it's very amazing because we're able to gain a partner that we're going to forever live, right? Forever we're going to be in the spiritual realm, in the golden city of heaven, right? And it's someone that we can always rely on to be with us. And there's multiple ways we can, see or see how God really touches our lives. We can see them through nature, or we can see them through the Word. And it's very amazing that we during this time are able to really know what God thinks, because since Luther, God didn't have contact with people until recently, right? And through the Word, we're able to know God's thoughts, and knowing God's thoughts is amazing, and it's something that can really strengthen our relationship with God. When we have an amazing relationship with God, then all the loneliness is gone within our life, right? And all this loneliness is filled with love, the abundant love of the Holy Spirit, the Holy Son, and Jesus. Yeah, that comment was amazing because it really made me think, like, regular people and me in the past especially, I've always in the past tried to find a cure to loneliness through other people, through media, through YouTube, and it never worked. It's like an endless chase for dopamine, which in my case, it really, I think it's a huge contributor to the mental or the difficulties that I've had in the past, right? So yeah, amazing comment. Thank you for commenting, and yeah, I'll see you in the comment section on this video too, I hope. So the second comment I want to read out to you guys. Sounds like you've had a lot of stress. While you are taking of the SS, please take care of yourself. Be aware that to not get burned out, focus on the time while you're doing the work, not as much as the task. Now that's an amazing piece of advice. Yeah, I can say strongly that I fall into the trap of the task. If God saw me right now, or me in the past, then I think that he'll be very kind of disappointed in an aspect. And in this aspect, when you're focused too much on the task, you're not focused really on the Trinity or on what's best for the SS. You're focused on getting the task done. And because, I'm, to be honest, really task oriented, it's funny, right? It goes both ways where, if I don't do a task or if I don't have a clear task, then I won't do anything. But, I really focus on these tasks but I don't have that love, or I don't have the reason behind the task, where or I'm not enjoying it, right? The task, which is perfectly fine, but especially with spiritual work, right? You have to enjoy it. You have to focus on the time. Then you're able to realize that, I done 2 hours of SS work where I was crunching numbers and making sure everyone attends this meeting. I should do some spiritual stuff. Sometimes if you're either maybe in my position, or maybe even higher up, I could imagine people doing spiritual work, doing activities or setting up meetings, it might feel like it's spiritual work. However, in reality, you're just on your computer doing actual work that you would do at an office, right? And so that's something that I truly believe that would take the stress off. If I really enjoyed my work, and if I really tried to connect with the Lord and with Jesus while I do this SS work, then even during those very tiresome, to be honest, work, and sometimes it's very boring work, it'll be amazing, and I'll be trying to find new ways to make the SS enjoy their time. So I truly believe that this comment, even while you're taking care of other people, it's very important to take care of yourself, right? And make sure you're not burning out. So take care of your basic needs, right? Your transportation, make sure you're having food, very good fuel, because food is like fuel, right? And whatever you put into your body, even though the outcome might not be the best, not the best, but the process is what matters when talking about food, right? People say calories in, calories out. Calories are same, but no. Having different types of food, having fast food compared to having some really healthy homemade food, very different. You're going to feel amazing during once and terrible after, but one type of food you're going to feel amazing after, but just so in the middle of eating, right? So there's a difference, because your basic needs are very important, and if you don't nail these, which includes sleep, wink wink, maybe a hint towards next week's episode, but sleep, very important too, because you need to get your sleep down, because it's a basic need. If you're sleeping 2 hours a day, you're not going to be functioning for long, baby. So that's a word that I've never used in this podcast before. I just realized that. Very awkward, but I'll keep it in. So I really want to thank everyone for commenting and cheering me up while I'm having these when I go through these cycles every 6 months, where I'm just in this deep despair. And it happened to me 6 months ago, which is predictable, I guess, but I rebounded, fortunately. I remember in the past when I was high school age, where I'll just be depressed for 3 months and I'll be sleeping all day, and it was not fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode. If you have anything you want to talk to me about, put it in the comment section below and let's have a conversation. And I really want to thank everyone that commented last week, and to those who comment on this week's episode, I might talk about it in next week's episode. So we're going to have a lot more fun. I truly thank you for listening to this episode. It's the weekend really soon, so I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. And to everyone who's going until the end with the Lord, let's walk this path together. Peace out, guys. Bye-bye.
And another awesome episode by Daniel Baker. Really thankful and grateful for all the hard work that he's doing. He's doing his SS mission, plus he's doing this podcast. He's doing a lot of different things at such a young age, and I have a lot of respect for him. Those of you guys out there, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast on beating loneliness and take those tips to heart. And also on top of that, thank you so much for all your comments that he's able to respond to them. And if you have any more comments, keep putting them down. If anything else, give him some encouragement and praise for all the amazing things that he's doing at such a young age in this history. Looking forward to seeing how great of a leader becomes in the future. All right, everyone, have an amazing and awesome weekend, and we'll see you guys again on Monday on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like